Rameshji, where are you? Where are you located? He didn't hear me, I guess.
His audio is not showing, I guess.
Yeah, it's all right.
His audio, yeah.
Rameshji, can you hear us?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, Raghuji was asking where are you located?
I am in Orlando at present,
Ah,
but I am in the San Martin group.
what group?
I used to live in San Martin before,
Oh, I see.
in Chimney group, San Martin.
I see.
So I have moved here in Orlando, Winter Park.
Retired now?
Huh?
Retired? Are you retired?
I didn't hear.
Are you working or
Voice is not coming. Retired.
I'm speaking. I don't know what I said.
Oh, you say. So I'm retired. Just
I see.
closed down all business, San Martin. So I'm staying with my son here.
Ah, okay, good.
Hari Om, everyone.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Yeah. Hari Om.
Hari Om, Uncle. Okay, so let's get
Hari
started.
Om.
Om. Om. Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sah Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavatyaptadehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Samastjanakalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahmavidvaram Sadgurum Brahmavidvaram. Hari Om. Rupam Drishyam Lochanam Drik Tadrishyam Driktumanasam Drishyadhivrittaya Sakshi Drigevanatu Drishyate. Hari Om, everyone. Welcome to our penultimate class. I think next week will be last. So we have been seeing the topic of Samadhi. So dhyana, nididhyasana, samadhi abhyasa, meditation, all of these different words are used to describe this practice and then the state of samadhi. So over these last couple of weeks, we have seen 3 definitions of samadhi. So we saw samadhi as a practice initially. So for instance, these 6 types of samadhi abhyasa, these 6 types of practices that this text alludes us to. So this is Samadhi first definition as a practice, a type. Then these practices well done can lead us to that state of Samadhi. So Samadhi's second definition we saw as a state, that state of Savikalpa or Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Once these states are achieved, the purpose of them is to take us higher, to a place that transcends all states itself, to Samadhi Atma. So Samadhi should lead us to realization also. So these were the 3 definitions that we saw of Samadhi, and how these 6 practices that are taught in this book factors into this. All 6 as a practice, which can lead to the state of Samadhi, which then is transcended to Samadhi Atma. So 3 definitions. Last week we saw a division of these 6 into 2 categories of Savikalpa and Nirvikalpa. First way of defining them or differentiating them. We saw definitions of Savikalpa, Nirvikalpa Samadhi and the distinctions between each of them. And we also allayed some of our doubts and our erroneous notions about these 2 states, particularly Nirvikalpa Samadhi and some of the erroneous notions which were there on that topic. Today, we will see further into this categorization of these 6 practices, which will aid us in the practice themselves and in the attainment of that state. So, Shloka 23 summarizes all 6 of them together. So, we'll begin at Shloka 23. And from the seed that's given in 23, the next 6 shlokas, 24, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, these next 6, each one deals with one of the 6 practices of Samadhi Abhyasa. So we'll go through each in succession. So Shloka 23 we'll chant. For those with the text, page 81. Savikalpo nirvikalpaha, Savikalpo nirvikalpaha, Samadhi dvivido hridi, Samadhi dvivido hridi, Drśya shabdanuvidhyena, Drśya shabdanuvidhyena, Savikalpah punardvida, Savikalpah punardvida. Savikalpo nirvikalpaha, Samadhi dvividho hridi, Drśya shabdanuvidhyena, Savikalpah punardvida. So the shloka is explaining one concept that we need to understand in this process of Samadhi. The classification of Samadhi into these different kinds, these 6 different ones, which we're about to see, is only in terms of practice and the stages of progression in practice. It is not in Samadhi itself. Means there are not 6 different types of Samadhi. So this is the first thing we need to understand. This Shloka 23 is describing the kinds of practice of Samadhi in 6 different ways, which can lead us to that one ultimate state. So what is the ways that are showed through the shloka? It says, Savikalpo, Savikalpaha, Nirvikalpaha, Samadhihi, Dvivido hridi. So it says, Samadhi is divided. Samadhi, Dvividha. So Samadhi is divided, Dvividha, in 2 ways. In what 2 ways? Savikalpaha and Nirvikalpaha. With duality and without duality. This practice can be done. It is done hridi. So hridi means inside, within. So the mention of the word hridi is alluding to the fact that if there's an inner practice, there's also an outer practice. So both hridi and bahya, these 2 forms are there as well. So Samadhi is inner and outer, hridi and bahya, and it's savikalpa and nirvikalpa. So 2 sets of divisions we're seeing here. Then a 3rd set of division is spoken of also. Drśya shabdanuvidhyena. Drśya, the seen, and shabda, words, anuvidhyena, associated with the seen and with words. So this is another pair that's given. Samadhi can be practiced. Savikalpaha, punaha dvida. So this savikalpa samadhi, once again, punaha is dvida, is divided 2-fold in this way. So from the shloka itself, we see three pairs of divisions given in this practice of samadhi. There is savikalpa and nirvikalpa, internal and external, hridi and bahya, and then drśya and shabda, associated with words and associated with the seen. From permutations and combinations of these three pairs, these 6 things that are listed here, from permutations and combinations of them, put together will fructify these 6 samadhi practices when they are put together in different ways. So for the next few shlokas, we're going to look at how each of these are meshed together to give the different types of samadhi. So to make it easier, I did a diagram to show. So let's take a quick look at this diagram to give an overview, and then we'll go into each one separately. So let me share screen. Okay, is everyone able to see? Okay, for some reason I can't see your faces anymore. Murli uncle, are you all able to see properly?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, good. So I don't know what happened. I can't see faces, but I'm seeing the screen. Okay, so the practice of samadhi, we see from this diagram, there's the internal, as I said before, and external. Within the internal practice of samadhi, hridi, there's a form with duality and without. So savikalpa and nirvikalpa. Then in savikalpa samadhi, the practice with duality, it takes 2 forms, focusing on the seen, drśya, and focusing on words, shabda. We see a similar set given in the external practice of samadhi. The external practice also has the forms with and without duality, savikalpa and nirvikalpa. And similarly, in the savikalpa practice of samadhi, there's those that invokes the use of the seen and those that invoke the use of words also. So the 6 ways in which the samadhi abhyas is done, the first one is in the internal practice of savikalpa samadhi, we use seen. So I'll describe what seen means as we go through the shloka. Or the second way is through the internal practice of savikalpa samadhi, we can use words also to trigger that state of samadhi. So these are 2 out of the 6 that we're speaking of. These 2 practiced very well, focusing on those seen and those words extremely well, the mind deepens to a state where it becomes absorbed into nirvikalpa samadhi. So this third one of nirvikalpa samadhi, triggered through drśya and shabda, fructifies out. So these are the first 3 types, which we'll look at today, the internal practice and the internal practice of samadhi abhyasa. Similarly, externally, a similar process is done where utilizing savikalpa samadhi, using words and seen. Also, these states practiced very well will eventually deepen into nirvikalpa samadhi, but the trigger being external, words and seen. So these are 2 methods, 2 groups of methods to lead us to that same state. This nirvikalpa samadhi, the state itself will be the same, but the triggers or the methods utilized to get to that state, we see 4 different methods here. So in this way, it's grouped into 2 areas. So I hope that diagram made it a bit clearer. So because the first time we did this, I was a bit confused and I said, no. And then on the next few pages, then I said, okay, we can use diagrams for this thing. So I thought I'll start with the diagram this time, just to allay any confusions. So what we'll do now, we're going to go through each of these 6. So the first one, as we saw, is going to be the first one we saw is internal. So savikalpa samadhi practiced inside using the seen. So this is the first one we're going to look at. Drśya, seen, drśya anuvidha, associated with the seen, savikalpa samadhi. So the technical name for the first process we're going to study is drśya anuvidha savikalpa samadhi. So this is the first one, which is given in shloka 24. So we'll look at each of the shlokas in sequence. Before we go to 24th shloka, to introduce the idea of the topic, Puja Guruji has given very nice commentary to begin this topic of samadhi and bridge the gap of savikalpa to nirvikalpa. So we'll read a bit from the commentary and then we'll go into each of the 6. So can I ask Anita Ma, can you read for us? So on the next page, look at 23, the page after. The second paragraph begins, in Savikalpa Samadhi, the meditator is the empirical jiva. Found?
Yeah.
So you can read those 2 paragraphs, that one and the one after.
In Savikalpa Samadhi, the meditator is the empirical jiva, the limited individual, and the object of meditation is the attributeless self. This duality of the meditator and the meditated upon exists in the practice stage. Once this duality disappears, the infinite self alone remains. This is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi. The practice of Savikalpa Samadhi culminates in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. It should be noted that the self is always Nirvikalpa, non-dual. It is the mind that creates duality. Once the mind is transcended, Nirvikalpa Samadhi is attained. An example of sleep illustrates this point. Tired after an honest day of labor, a man reaches his home. He has a shower, has dinner, maybe watches TV for some time, and then retires to bed. He makes himself comfortable in bed and slowly withdraws from the familiar world around him. His attention withdraws from the body. He wants nothing but sleep. Till the thoughts I remain, he is not asleep. There still remains the duality of one wanting to sleep and the state of sleep. Once sleep overpowers him, all dualities end. We can never determine the exact time when we sleep. If the thought of time remains, then we are awake. We glide unknowingly into sleep. Efforts can be put forth only to prepare for sleep. It is only when all efforts end that we fall asleep.
So very important point is made in these paragraphs, particularly the end. So this is comparable to the states of Savikalpa into Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So Puja Guruji says we glide unknowingly into sleep. Means from Savikalpa Samadhi, unknowingly as though effortlessly, that Nirvikalpa Samadhi should result, just in the same way that we glide from sleep, from waking into sleep, into deep sleep. Efforts can be put forth only to prepare for sleep. Means Savikalpa Samadhi becomes our preparatory phase. These practices of Savikalpa Samadhi, this is where we put forth the effort to prepare ourselves. It is only when all efforts end that we all fall asleep. Only when these practices of Savikalpa Samadhi are done well and perfected, then on the momentum of those efforts, we will glide effortlessly into that Nirvikalpa Samadhi, that state of sleep. So sleep gives a good example of understanding that transition from Savikalpa into Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Now, Puja Guruji ends this part of the commentary with a very interesting point where he talks about Samadhi being a very strange practice if we were to all examine it a little bit closer. See, the meditator in this practice of Samadhi or meditation, the meditator is a non-existing superimposed entity. The meditator is my mind, which is adhyasa. Mind itself is a superimposed entity. The object of meditation is actually the subject. The ultimate subject itself is the object that we are attempting to meditate on. It is that which illumines the object, but yet the object is attempting to contact the subject through meditating on it, an object which actually doesn't exist. And the practice of meditation then becomes a suicidal act on the part of the meditator. Because who is meditating? Me, as this body, mind, and intellect, I am meditating. But in meditation, what I seek to achieve is realizing my identity as Atma. When I realize my identity as Atma, my identity as Ahankara will be negated. But Ahankara rests in that mind which is meditating. So mind is meditating in order to achieve a state which will negate mind itself. So it is as though suicide, that Ahankara is performing suicide. Through this practice, it will negate itself. So meditation becomes a very strange procedure in this way, but very beautiful. Another point is made here in Guruji's commentary. He says, it would be very strange if we woke up every morning and we meditated, I am human being, I am a human being, I'm a man, or I'm a woman. Because we don't need to meditate on what we know we are. Actually, we are Atma. But for some reason, we have become deluded and have forgotten what our true state is. And so now we have to practice reminding ourselves of who we really are. It's very strange, this entire process of meditation. And if anyone were to stop and think about it, it would really bring to light the level of delusion that is there in our life. That we are so deluded and so addicted to this personality, which I am not, that we just cannot see the truth. And this is the importance of Samadhi Abhyasa in removing that erroneous notion and replacing us to our true initial glory. I'll give an example of this. There is a very poor person who doesn't know that he has inherited millions from some rich relative. And he has lived his entire life just scrimping by, trying to make sure he has what is needed. But he does a lot of seva. Whatever he has, he offers. This rich relative has decided, my other children, nieces, nephews, they just waste because they know we have money. That one distant one who is doing so much, I'm going to give everything to him. Now that relative dies and leaves everything to him. He has no clue that he's now a millionaire. The fact that he does not know he's a millionaire, does that mean he's not a millionaire? No. He is a millionaire even though he doesn't know it. That's us. We are Ananda Swarupa Atma. We are filled with infinite bliss. But yet I am so convinced that I am this body, mind, and intellect, this limited being, begging to come from little worldly pleasures all over. And I've forgotten what my true state is. Just because I don't know I'm Atma, it doesn't mean I'm not Atma. I am still that repository of bliss. Just as even though he doesn't know he's a millionaire, that doesn't mean he's not a millionaire. We are Atma regardless. But the problem is that he has interacted in his life so long as a poor person that he cannot even conceptualize being a millionaire. So even after being told, even after Shravanam comes into our life and we are told we are that Atma, we can't believe it. He continues practicing, living within his means, not spending at all, not until it is repeatedly told to him and he repeatedly tells himself, no, you're a millionaire now. Not until he sees that paperwork and he understands, oh my gosh, this is all in my name. Not until he holds that money in his hand from the bank and he says, oh my gosh, this is mine. I am rich. Only then he realizes, oh my God, I'm a millionaire. That's us also. Even after Shravanam, we can't believe that we are Atma. Only when we begin to do Mananam, we start to recurrently tell ourselves, no, you are rich, you are Ananda Swarupa. Only when we begin to see that paperwork means all our doubts begin to go as we churn this knowledge. And only when I hold that experience of Atma in myself, in that state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, in that state of meditation, when I can actually touch as though, understand my nature, experience that bliss. When I hold that money in my hand and I know, oh my gosh, this is real. I am a millionaire. Experience, I am Ananda Swarupa Atma. Only then will I be freed from this notion of this body, mind, and intellect. Only then will I be freed from the notion that I am a pauper. I am actually rich. This is the importance of Samadhi Abhyasa. That no matter how much Shravanam and Mananam I do, not until I hold that money in my hand will I believe this is what I am. Then I'll get it. So without this Samadhi Abhyasa, without experiencing it myself, without having that aparokra anubhava, I will never come to really understand and experience my Brahmatva, know my true nature. So this is the importance of this practice of Samadhi Abhyasa, which we're going to learn all the different means of getting into. So now we go into the first one. So Shloka 24 speaks about the first of these six that we talked about. Internal, Savikalpa Samadhi, Drśya, using the scene. So the Shloka says, Shloka 24. Kamadhyas chittaga drishyaha कामाद्याश्चित्तगा दृश्याः तत्साक्षित्वेन चेतनम् तत्साक्षित्वेन चेतनम् ध्यायेत् दृश्यानुविद्धोऽयम् ध्यायेत् दृश्यानुविद्धोऽयम् समाधिः सविकल्पकः समाधिः सविकल्पकः कामाद्याश्चित्तगा दृश्याः तत्साक्षित्वेन चेतनम् ध्यायेद्दृश्यानुविद्धोऽयम् समाधिः सविकल्पकः. So the shloka says, Kamadhyaha chittagaha drishyaha. So drishyaha, the seen, plural, the seen takes the form of chittagaha, those thoughts which are arising in my mind, kamadhyaha, like desire, etc. So all these different thoughts, emotions, desires, circumstances arising in my mind, these are known as the seen. So Vidyaranya Swamiji is defining what is this scene that we need to meditate on in order to enter into the state of Savikalpa Samadhi. So the scene in this circumstance, in internal Samadhi, is thoughts and the different forms that our thoughts take as desires, circumstances, emotions, all of these things. That sakshittvena chetanam, that as their witness, as their sakshi, chetanam, witness that consciousness, which is the observer of these things, witness that consciousness, which is the substratum of all of these thoughts. Dhyayet, one should meditate in this way on the witness, as the witness. Drśya anuvidhaha, that associated with seen, this is ayam, samadhi savikalpakaha. This is savikalpa samadhi, that meditation associated with duality through drishya, through the seen. So, the shloka is defining first drishya anuvidha samadhi. Means when a thought arises in our mind, so this we all have to observe for ourselves so that we can learn how to practice this. When a thought arises in our mind, we tend to enter into that thought. We become a part of that thought. The minute anger arises, I become angry and I become absorbed in that anger. I cannot differentiate that mind has been triggered in a way that it feels affronted and has become angry off of circumstances that relate to the body. I cannot differentiate out body and mind from me, from the witness of them. And I enter into that circumstance instead of directing my attention towards the source of where that thought arises from. We contemplate on the object of the thought, the circumstance within the thought itself, and get lost in that, instead of the source from where that thought is arising. In Savikalpa Samadhi, what we do is we shift that attention back to the sakshi, to the witness of the thought. We flip that equation. And so the substance of the thought itself, the matter of the thought, becomes something separate from me, and I become the onlooker of that thought. The thought at that point now cannot affect me anymore. Nothing that I see as that thought is unfolding can affect me. Why? What's happening in this state is, if we separate a thought out, every thought has idam and aham aspects to it. Aham is the I, the consciousness that is allowing that thought to even be known. Idam means this. It is the this within that thought, this emotion, this circumstance. Without me, I cannot know any of these thoughts within my mind. And so when I separate out aham from idam in that thought, this is what this form of samadhi is teaching me to do. It says one should meditate on the consciousness as the witness of these thoughts. What form does these thoughts take? So drishya. We have to understand what the drishya is so we can separate ourselves out from it. Drishya is mind itself, which is a flow of idam vrittis, a flow of thoughts of this. What is the form of this? Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So I had mentioned this this definition before, it has one of the more elaborate definitions of what this mind is, what these idam vrittis are. So it says that mind is of the nature of kama sankalpa, vichikitsa, shraddha, ashraddha, dhriti, adhriti, hrihi, dhihi, bhihi, iti etat sarvam manaha. Iti etat sarvam. All of this manaha is mind. What is it? Kama, desire. So in this shloka where it starts kama dyas chittaga drishyaha, kama dyaha, desires, etc. So what is the etc.? The shruti for that is Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which says kama sankalpa vichikitsa. Kama, desire, sankalpa, volition, vichikitsa, doubts, shraddha, ashraddha, belief, disbelief, dhiti, adhriti, fortitude and lack of it, hrihi, dhihi, bhihi, modesty, understanding, fear. All of these things arise in that mind. These are the different forms that mind takes. All of these are those idam vrittis, the this, the idam associated with the aham within thoughts. In meditation, in this form of drishya anuviddha samadhi, we focus that I am the witness of these thoughts. I am not the thoughts that I perceive, which is the first thing we get caught up in. So it's teaching us to take a step back in life and see the matter of the thought separate from me. I am the witness of the thought. I am not the thoughts that I perceive. Thoughts appear and disappear. The mind remains ever conscious of their presence and absence. And I continue even after the absence of them. In the state of deep sleep, when all thoughts go into laya, I am still present. I know I am. This is that existence aspect in me, that consciousness aspect. These thoughts are inert and ephemeral. I am sentient and eternal, and therefore I illumine those insentient thoughts. So in this way, we have to do mananam initially in order to successfully practice this form of drishya anuviddha samadhi. So we're being guided on how to get to there. With these sort of thought repetitions, reminding myself of all of these aspects, we can reach a subtler form of contemplation on the thought. With the matter of that thought no longer matters. The words themselves actually end, and I know myself to be the observer of the thought. When I switch my attention and meditate on the consciousness as the witness of that thought, my mind as though turns back in on itself. And it's as though I'm standing on the bank of a river and watching the water flow by. So I become that one in my mind, standing on the bank of that river, watching the flow of my thoughts go by in front of me. So this I want all of you to try just for 2 minutes now. We'll just attempt this. So we haven't prepared for meditation. So mind is still a bit chanchal right now, but we'll at least try a bit of it so you can taste what it should be like. So you practice it on your own after this. So now for just 1 minute, sit quietly, comfortably, eyes closed. Take a deep breath in and out. In your mind now, just observe what's happening. Let your thoughts go. Get involved in the thought if you want to. Just observe the atmosphere of your mind. See what comes. Now I want you to begin to pull away a bit from the thought and observe the type of thoughts that are coming as though they're separate from you. Take that image of standing on the bank of a river and watching the water flow by. Take that image into your mind. Now see the flow of that river as the flow of your thoughts going by. And focus on yourself standing on the bank, separate from them. Turn your attention towards the seer, the one that is observing. Let your mind focus in on the eye that is watching those thoughts. Let your mind focus on the consciousness which is enlivening my ability to even see a thought. Observe now that mind is so involved in observing who it is that is watching that it has forgotten the matter of the thought. It has forgotten what circumstance or emotion or desire was going through it. It is so focused on the one that's watching the thought that it has forgotten the substance of the thought itself, that idam vritti. As we focus in on aham, on the one who's watching, the matter, the substance of the thought itself drops away, and mind becomes absorbed into the consciousness that's watching it. Stay with that consciousness, and little by little, if you can, deepen the intensity of your observation of that consciousness. Feel that I, consciousness, as me. Feel that jnana swarupa, that sense of knowing that is what I am. Not what I know or how I know it, but I am knowledge. I am that ability of knowing. And sink your mind into that consciousness, that bright light, white light of consciousness, which is what I am. As mind sinks deeper and deeper into that consciousness, they will reach a point when mind will actually drop off, being absorbed in the bhava of just consciousness. So you can take a deep breath when you're ready and slowly open your eyes. So I'm not sure how successful it may have been because we're in classroom atmosphere, but were any of y'all at least able to connect to that quietude of mind that happened when you turned your mind towards the seer instead of the thoughts itself? Anyone? Manuama. Okay, good. So quite a few. So that's good. At least you're able to understand. Lashmi Amma turned on her video, so I assumed she was going to say me. Good. Yeah. Good. Ramesh Uncle also. Very nice. So at least this is the idea of what we'll have to do. It's not so successful in a classroom atmosphere because you'll have to prepare yourself properly for it. Vishwaji has a question. 1 second. Let me just finish the thought, Vishwaji. Then you can ask. But this is how, when you prepare yourself properly, early morning, place is quiet, all chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita gives all the different things, how you prepare asana and sit quietly and all that. And you chant Om and you put yourself into this meditative state. Now, this is how you pull yourself back for Drśya Anuvidha Samadhi, for observing the Drśya, the seen as thoughts within your mind, and how you pull your mind back and turn it back on the witness of the thought. What will happen there is, once I was studying these meditative practices, and the teacher there had said, you use your hands even. Imagine your hands as the seer. And then you turn your hands in on yourself, and it's as though you can look into yourself. For some reason, that had a huge impact on me. I want you all to try that also. Just hold your hands out in front of you. Imagine your hands as the seer, as the witness. And forget the camera screen now. Look at your hands. And turn your hands in on yourself, as though you're looking at yourself through your hands. So for some people, it has an impact. I don't know how many, but when I did that the first time, I felt as though these hands were like eyes looking back in on me. And immediately some snap happened. I don't know how many of y'all were able to experience that or not, but different people, this is a way of using drśya, using objects that you can see to turn your attention back on the seer. That's all of these practices are. So that's an external one you can use. This one is internal. So we'll go into external practices next week. Most likely we'll do those. But this is the internal one of it's as though your eyes are turning back in on yourself, inside of your mind. Though this is the external way of showing it. That's all. But internally, this is what you have to imagine, that mind is turning back in on itself and watching itself. And in that state, what happens is mind is kramadrik. It can only see in sequence. It cannot see two things simultaneously. So if it's looking in, it can't look out at the same time. So the more I focus in on the one who's watching the thought, it cannot focus out on the matter of the thought itself, the circumstance or the emotion that was happening in my mind. And so that circumstance stops affecting me, and we don't even realize. When we try to say, don't let that thing affect me, it affects you more, because the more you tell your mind, don't think about it, is the more it thinks about it. So instead of doing that, what you do is you just turn the mind's attention to something else. It cannot watch two things at once. So as you turn it in on yourself, it cannot watch outside anymore. And the matter of that thought actually falls away. So this is how many people sit in meditation and they say, I can't get this mind to stop. It's because you're focusing on the thoughts of the mind, and mind is becoming entrenched in those thoughts. It's not about focusing on the thought and getting the thought to stop. It's about turning the focus away from the thought. The thought will drop. I can only look this way. If I look backward, then what is behind me, I can't see anymore. So when you turn that mind in on itself, the thoughts that it was looking at before, it can't see it anymore. And those thoughts stop affecting. So this is the principle of that Drśya Anuvidha Samadhi, that you use the thoughts to take you back to the Sakshi of the thought. Use the thought to shift my attention to consciousness, which is the enlivener of that thought. So I'm paying attention now to the revealer, not the revealed. So in this way, this practice, that I am not the thoughts that I perceive, I am the seer of those thoughts. And just to remain the observer of that thought. And the more you can observe that consciousness and go deeper and deeper into that sense of just consciousness, those thoughts will fall away naturally. As it deepens, that mind can go into a state of nirvikalpa samadhi after that, once well practiced. So this is that first one of Shabda Anuvidha Samadhi. So questions now on this part of the topic. So Vishwaji, you have a question?
No, Jyotiji. I just was about to say that that practice was really helpful for me. I just came out of my pranayama and yoga session. For me, it was immediately I was able to make myself calm and get deep into that silence. I just wanted to add that, you know, if it is that difficult to focus that mind, I just wanted to say japa also really helps, you know, to make it single pointed. You know,
Definitely.
yeah, it could be any nama japa, you know, just concentrated japa of Om Namah Shivaya or Hari Om, or you know, any japa that is very catchy to that being, you know, that also helps you to get to that single pointed, too much inward, and then slowly you could go to a state of silence from there. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Vishwaji. See, Vishwaji practiced a very smart thing, actually. He did his pranayama and so on before. So he was in a state ready for meditation, actually. So when we did the practice, he was able to go straight into that. So very wise, what you did. But we see the how these practices can bear fruit. But the pre-preparation needs to be there also. That's why I said in class, not so much success may be there. But do the same thing tomorrow morning when you wake up early, when you've done your pranayama, you've done your kriya, whatever you need to do before, and then sit in this state. The text itself, and even Guruji commented in the commentary, it doesn't go into detail on the pre-preparations that you need. This text is clearly Vidyaranya Swamiji, not Shankaracharya, because Shankaracharya will give all of the, build you up, what you need, and then go into that. Vidyaranya Swamiji just hits straight. So in some of these ways, authors have said this is a text of Vidyaranya Swamiji, not Shankaracharya, because you see the style of writing. He just goes straight it. So all pre-practices and so on, like what Vishwaji was speaking of, making that mind come, doing your japam and so on before. So that will help in those pre-steps. Then what's given in these shlokas is exactly the practice itself. after all of that has been finished. So this is that topic of Drishyanuvidha Samadhi as is given in this text. It needs to be practiced now, but after you've done your precepts. So tomorrow morning, you all can try this one if you want to, that turning the mind in on itself, and meditate on the witness, on consciousness as the witness of these thoughts. Any other questions on this one before we go to the next?
Satyan, I had a question.
Yes, Satyanji.
Why is this called meditation with duality? What is the dual part here?
So the dual part is that we're using drishya, we're using thoughts. So duality is still present, as in me and the thought. Savikalpa as opposed to nirvikalpa. Nirvikalpa samadhi, mind drops completely. There's no thought, there's no knowing anything else but myself. So as long as anything other than me is there and I'm utilizing it as a means to get into that state of samadhi, then duality is still there. So I'm utilizing the thought, whatever is coming. I'm utilizing kama, sankalpa, vichikitsa, all of these things to start with. Remember, this samadhi is practice, is the practice that's being explained here.
So basically here, we are using the thoughts to turn the mind away from the thought and focus.
Correct.
Okay.
So an alambanam is needed, a support or a point of focus is first needed to facilitate this process. So that point of focus is thought. So that's why it's still within duality, that we're using something else, as opposed to nirvikalpa samadhi, where we're not utilizing any other support.
Isn't this what Ramana Maharishi also said? He said, ask for to whom does the thought arise.
Correct. Yeah. So that's exactly what Ramana Maharishi ji was alluding to. Use that thought to turn it back onto the one who's asking about the thought. So nice example there. Drishyanuvidha Samadhi. Good. Very nice. Anyone else? So let's look a bit into Shabdanuvidha Samadhi now. So in Shabdanuvidha Samadhi, Shloka 25. Shloka 25 now we'll chant. Asangas Satchidanandaha Asangas Satchidanandaha Swaprabho Dvaita Varjitaha Swaprabho Dvaita Varjitaha Asmiti Shabdavidhoyam Asmiti Shabdavidhoyam Samadhis Savikalpakaha Samadhis Savikalpakaha Asangas Asangas Satchidanandaha Swaprabho Dvaitavarjitaha Asmiti Shabdavidhoyam Samadhis Savikalpakaha. So the shloka says Asangaha Satchidanandaha Swaprabhaha. So all of these words, Asanga, unattached, Satchidananda, existence, consciousness, bliss, Swaprabhaha, that one who is self-shining. Dvaita Varjitaha, without any duality. Aham asmiti, this is what I am. So focusing on these words, these sort of words, Shabda Vidhaha Ayam. So this is Shabda Vidha, associated with Shabda, associated with words, Samadhi Savikalpakaha. That meditation with duality, Savikalpa Samadhi, associated with words, Shabdanuvidhaha. It takes this form. So see the distinction between Shabda and Drishyanuvidha Samadhi. With Drishyanuvidha Samadhi, I'm using things that I can see, that have a form in my mind. In Shabdanuvidha Samadhi, look at these words. Asanga. If someone says, think of an apple, you can see a form. But if someone says, think of unattached, what do you see? There's no form to that. If someone says, think of the circumstance that made you angry, you will play out a scene in your head. That's Drishya. Whereas if someone says, think of Satchidananda, there's no thought form for that, a distinctive form given. So these are just words that invoke a bhava. They're not drishya. This is how Shabda works now. So there's no thought form. There's just a feeling which is invoked through these thoughts. So this is Shabdanuvidha Samadhi, which we can use. Eventually, our Drishyanuvidha Samadhi sort of sinks into Shabdanuvidha in terms of I will look at a circumstance first. I'll see it happening. I'll see me getting angry in this particular circumstance that's going through my head. And when I sit for meditation, that's the first thing that will come to mind. What went wrong? So these thoughts first are what come. then eventually that drishya, that scene scenario, goes to shabda almost, just that word of anger, and then the feeling of anger. That's when that drishya goes to shabda, when the thought itself goes to just a feeling invoked by that thought. So this is one example of an external way, but internally for this practice, the type of words we're using are like Satchidananda, Asanga. The bhava created off of that is what I focus on in myself. And the understanding of those words will eventually sink in. So these words are not meant to be mantras like Asangoham, Satchidanandoham, Aham Eva Advayam, all of these things. So they're not mantras to be repeated like Japam. They're meant to be utilized for the understanding the significance of the word. It makes no sense repeating these things if I don't understand what's the significance behind them. What's the anubhava that comes out when I chant these words? Satchidanandoham, Asangoham, Dvaitavarjitam, Aham. The words are used with the aim of establishing myself in the truth signified by those words. So our focus of attention should not be on the word itself. We use the word initially, but we have to lift our mind to the meaning implied by the word. So the words are going to help our effort in concentrating the mind. Since words are what is being used as the aid to trigger this concentration and bring in the bhava of the understanding, then this form of meditation is called meditation associated with words. So this is how it gets that name, Shabdanuvidha Samadhi. The words are being used as the alambanam, the support, through which I get an understanding of the underlying meaning, and then mine goes into that anubhava, Satchidananda, Asanga, Advitiya, and I sink into the understanding of the word itself. Now, these words don't have to be in Sanskrit only, they can be English words even. If I want to say I'm absolutely unattached, I'm absolutely free, then if these words hit more strongly, or your local language, there's some words that really bring that anubhava straight in, you use whatever words are required. You can use even dhyana shlokas. So like for those in Viveka Churamani class, we learned those dhyana shlokas. Jati niti kula gotra duragam nama rupa guna dosha varjitam desha kala vishayati vartiyat brahma tattvamasi bhavayatmani. So we use words to trigger those thoughts. Jati, niti, kula, gotra, duragam. That all of these different words that bring a thought of a limited being, I am beyond all of those things. Desha, kala, all of these things, I am beyond. Brahma tattvamasi, this is what I am. So what I do is I understand the purport of what those words are implying, and I shift my attention in that means. So it's a communion or an abidance in the knowledge, in Shabda Pramana, in what Mahavakyas revealed to me. So when mind, you sit for samadhi, you sit for meditation practice, and mind becomes distracted by different thoughts, you use a heavier thought as though anchor that mind in the direction that you want. And the heavier thought that you use are these sort of words to turn that mind towards my Brahmatva. So use Tatpada Swarupa Lakshanas, all of the qualities of that Tatpada, that Brahman, like those Dhyana shlokas, and absorb yourself into what the word is revealing. As you focus on the words and the implication, the understanding of the words, and that anubhava comes, mind will eventually absorb itself into the purport of that word, and mind will begin to fall away. This is where Nirvikalpa Samadhi, that Savikalpa Samadhi, can deepen into Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Eventually, Drśya, everything that I'm seeing, the seer of what is being seen, mine will eventually absorb into the Sakshi of that scene. The words itself will dissolve into the purports of the words, and mind becomes quieter and quieter at that point. And this is how Savikalpa Samadhi deepens into Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So this is the culmination of these first two practices, Drśya and Shabda Anuvidha Samadhi, merging and melting as though into the third one, Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So these are how these two practices are used to lead to the third one, and they become that first packet of three, the three forms of internal Samadhi practice. So that's the first, the left-hand side of that chart that we would have seen. Yeah, so this is how the process goes. So the next shloka, shloka 26, talks about that deepening process and how these lead into the other. So we'll just finish up with this shloka. So shloka 26 says, Svanubhutirasaveshat, Svanubhutirasaveshat, Drśya Shabdhavupekshatu, Drśya Shabdhavupekshatu, Nirvikalpasamadhisyat, Nirvikalpasamadhisyat, Nivatasthitadeepavat, Nivatasthitadeepavat, Svanubhutirasaveshat, Drśya Shabdhavupekshatu, Nirvikalpasamadhisyat, Nivatasthitadeepavat. So the shloka says, Sva Anubhuti, that internal realization of myself. Rasa Aveshat, entering deeply into that rasa, into that blissful experience. How does it happen? Upeksha, having ignored Shabda Drśya. Drśya Shabdao Upeksha. So when that scene and words become negated, they become absorbed into the bhava that those words were implying, into the seer of that scene, upeksha, then the state resulting is nirvikalpa samadhi syat. Then I enter into that state of meditation without duality. Mind, having ignored all thoughts and all words, now becomes like that flame, that deepa that is protected from the wind. It stays very firm, very steady. It doesn't waver, doesn't move at all. Nivata sthita deepavata. Like that deepa, that flame, nivata sthita, placed in a position, in a location, free from all winds. Means the winds of our thoughts, the winds of our minds, the winds of our emotions. That mind now sinks into a state where these winds can no longer affect it. When all drishya and shabda absorb into that state, this is nirvikalpa samadhi. So drishya, which focuses on the gross, then goes to shabda, which is an anubhava, a subtler aspect of those words and those thoughts, and eventually deepens now into that nirvikalpa samadhi. So this is that final state. So this is the sequence that these two will then lead to that third. So this much we'll do on this topic for now. Any questions before we close? Anna? Yes, Ramesh uncle? Yes, Ramesh uncle, go ahead.
I have a question. You said about the word and sin. On these two, word and sin. Like in Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavan Krishna said, I am in sun, I am in Vrispati, I am in Indra. In other words, means his I am is also in me, you, and everyone. So what is that? It's a samadhi, or how he said like that, I am.
So you can utilize that actually as one of the forms of leading you into that state of samadhi. It means Bhagavan is showing his Vibhuti Yoga, that he is this entire creation and everything that's out there. So this is actually that external form. So we did the internal three, those three practices. The external three practices of samadhi, which we'll go into next week, utilizes things like that. So we'll actually go into that next week. We're looking at the sun, looking at other beings around me. I am Kubera, I am this, I am Pushan, I am the sun, I am everything else. So this is an external form of meditation also. So that is Savikalpa Samadhi using Drśya in Bahya. So that exactly we'll go into next week. That fits into that second half of the diagram that we saw. So it is a form of samadhi, of meditating on all of these things as myself, which will take us to that nirvikalpa state of understanding, as Bhagavan is revealing in Bhagavad Gita, I am all of these things, see to their core, see their substratum. how that same existence runs through all of them. That is the existence that is you also. In that way, that Savikalpa, seeing them as differentiated different things like the sun and different beings, will eventually deepen into that Nirvikalpa, that understanding of just the existence, which is the core of all of them, is that same existence in me. And I become absorbed into that existence aspect, Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So yes, uncle, exactly that entire chapter of Bhagavad Gita can be used for that kind of dhyanam of all of these external forms of the Lord being what is my true essence, Bhagavan is showing.
I just had one question.
Yes, Satyanji.
I think last week I was told that Savikalpa and Nirvikalpa are the same forms of, or are at par with one another, right? So both are Samadhi, and it is not that one is more superior to the rest, or right? But in this text, the 26th that we read, is that talking about Nirvikalpa, or is it talking about Savikalpa?
Yeah, the 26th that we read talks about how Savikalpa will lead you into Nirvikalpa.
So when we use words like leads to, or in this verse when it says in this non-dual, it is almost like a flame where there is no wind, basically because it is a constant identity with Bhagavan, right? So how can we say that one is not inferior to the other, or one is superior?
So when we talk about Sahaja Samadhi next week, you'll see how they're actually on an even playing field. One, so Savikalpa Samadhi, remember, we're not talking about Samadhi Atma yet. We're talking about 6 practices. Remember the definition of Samadhi, right? 3
Yes,
sets.
Samadhi is the path, Samadhi is the...
Right. Good. So we're talking about Samadhi practices. So when you look at Samadhi as a practice, then one will lead into the other. That Savikalpa can lead us into Nirvikalpa. When you look at Samadhi as Atma, that state of Savikalpa Samadhi, well practiced, that leads to Sahaja Samadhi, which I'll explain next week. I was supposed to do this week, but time ran out very quickly. So I have a slide on that we'll explain next week. That state, that Savikalpa state, you can actually be in Samadhi Atma while there. That Nirvikalpa state, you can be in Samadhi Atma while there. Both of them can give you that realization. So in that way, neither one is superior to the other. In fact, in that way, you may even argue that Nirvikalpa Samadhi is inferior to Savikalpa Samadhi, because you need Savikalpa Samadhi as a conduit to get to that, whereas Savikalpa Samadhi can deliver you Samadhi Atma all on its own. Whereas Nirvikalpa Samadhi requires the support of Savikalpa Samadhi before you realize that Samadhi Atma. So in that way, it leading to the other doesn't necessarily mean the other is superior. The other can also be seen as inferior if you were to use that sort of categorical approach of sequencing. What we're showing is
So
that
it is
even
not a
though...
sequence. Got it. Got it. Sorry. It is not a sequence. I was thrown by the word of leads to. So it makes sense now. Thank you.
It can be utilized in sequence. Savikalpa Samadhi can lead us into that Nirvikalpa Samadhi. It can be utilized as a sequence, but it also breaks free from that sequencing. That is also possible. So in this way, you'll see why both are actually on an equal playing field. So next week, when we go into Sahaja Samadhi and so on, we'll go more into that. So more clarity will come on that topic.
Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you.
Good. Okay, so we're 3 minutes over time. I don't like to go, but Nuli uncle has a question. Okay, uncle, quickly.
I just wanted to ask you, when you say the word, you mentally think about the word, so you keep your mind occupied by the meaning of the word. In the first place, you turn inside and focus on the witness. In the second one, you keep the meaning of it and keep mind occupied on the meaning and try to understand the...
Correct. So that's the distinction between the two. Good, uncle. So you gave a nice distinction. So that's how there are 2 different practices in that way. Good. Okay.
Thanks.
So we'll close here for today. Next week we'll go into that second half of the chart that we saw, external forms of samadhi, but we'll go through those much more quickly because it's same Drśya and Shabda in a different way, deepening into Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So much more quickly, we'll cover the other half next week and we'll wrap up the shlokas. So next week will be our last week together. And I have a nice video clip from Gurudev also to end with. Really nice one on meditation. So we'll see all of that next week. closed. Oh. Purnamadav Purnamitam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Hari Om, everyone. And
Hari
please
Om.
try or practice tomorrow morning when you wake up. Try that Drśya and turning the mind and see if it works for you. Yeah. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om, everyone. Hari Om, Jyoti.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om, Vishnuji.